The website WTF Happened in 1971 illustrates a major economic turning point because it contributes to inflation. Let me describe 1970s life. I'll show you lots of data and explain everything. It's hard to believe the numbers, but living was cheaper back then. In 1971, the average person earned $885 per month, or just over $10,000 per year. A new home cost $25,000, 2.5 times the average worker's pay. Today, the median household income is just over $44,000, while the median home value is over $400,000, about 10 times the average American's salary. Today, it takes 7 years to save for a house, compared to 2.4 years in 1971. In the 1970s, a new car cost roughly $3,000. You could have saved money on a new car like this. In 1971, rent was $50 per month, or a sixth of the average monthly earnings. In modern days, a one-bedroom apartment costs $1,750 a month, and a two-bedroom costs $2,650, which is more than half the average monthly wage, much more than 1/6. In the 1970s, when it was necessary to show employers that you had a degree, you could enroll in a prominent Ivy League school like Harvard and spend only $2,600 per year in tuition, compared to today's $54,000. Food and entertainment were also cheaper. It gets crazier. From 1948 to 1972, a nation's productivity increased at a rate similar to its residents' incomes, which is ideal. But we took a turn for the worse. Our output rose 246% while our income rose 50% compared to productivity. It's kind of amazing to observe that from 1917 to 1970, the incomes of the poorest 90% of earners were really improving. Except that after 1970, it flatlined and then began to plummet. After the 1970s, top 1% incomes rose substantially. Our wages are falling relative to the economy's income, despite all our wars and depression. Until the 1970s, the Consumer Price Index showed remarkably stable inflation. In the 1970s, the nation's debt skyrocketed and U.S. personal savings rates fell. Many lived with their parents as a result. What happened in 1971 to start this? The Nixon shock occurred when President Richard Nixon abandoned the Bretton Woods Agreement. The U.S. possessed 2/3 of the world's gold reserves, giving it the power to try something new and top the global order. On April 5, 1933, Executive Order 6102 outlawed private gold ownership. All states ratified the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement in Phase 2. Countries exchanged their gold-backed currencies for the dollar, which could be redeemed for gold, and we made the dollar the principal currency for international trade. Thus, other nations need US dollars. The approach worked well until we discovered we could print more paper than gold. The central banks committed to keeping the dollar at 1/35 ounce of gold, so nobody would notice. We gained power by printing, but it caused problems at home. As we dispersed more money and governments started exchanging fiat money for gold, we ran out. After much speculation, nations fled and claimed their gold. When governments recognized they needed more fiat to address domestic challenges like the Vietnam War and the Great Depression, it was too late. Because we didn't have their gold, Richard Nixon removed us from the gold standard, turning the currency into debt. Fiat currencies, which differ from commodity-based currencies, were the first problem. Our government created fiat, which means governing by decree, and it relies exclusively on public confidence. Since they didn't have to retain gold, central banks could print money indefinitely. We printed too much money to tackle the global pandemic, causing inflation. Thus, there is more money, yet the same number of products are getting more expensive. Why don't we just stop printing money altogether and switch to a currency that is perhaps based on Bitcoin or gold? And the more you consider it, the crazier this whole thing seems to be, and the more you'll understand why they made it that way. I'll present you with one viewpoint and an alternative. Imagine a world in which money was always in fixed quantity, and no longer under the power of the government. It would be a great, wonderful idea if inflation was kept at 0%, because then things would always cost what they currently cost forever. However, given that we have access to cheaper labor, manufacturing, and globalization, inflation could never be at zero. Technology, which over time improves, becomes more affordable and increases efficiency, which implies that, in reality, there would be deflation, in which the value of everything relative to the dollar would decline and the value of your dollar would simply increase. Imagine you were putting money aside to purchase a $1,000 television. If you knew that the price of that television would drop by $100 the following week, would you actually go out and purchase it now? What if you knew the price will be $400 cheaper the following month and $100 less at the end of the year for the identical television? Today, most people probably wouldn't purchase it. They would simply wait till the television became absurdly inexpensive, or when they had saved slightly more money. But that leads to the same issue as Bitcoin does, namely that no one wants to spend their Bitcoin because they are aware of its long-term appreciation. People hoard Bitcoin because they want to keep it because it is deflationary and has a finite quantity of 21 million coins, which causes everything related to it to lose value. However, this leads to another issue. People need access to money, but they won't have it as the planet and its population continues to rise, since those who currently possess it will just hoard it. They intend to keep storing it, raising the value of the available supply. If inflation is at 2%, you are artificially encouraged to be a consumer today so that we can produce greater things for tomorrow. If you wait to buy your dream house next year, it will just get more expensive every single year. Without that idea, we wouldn't have anything that is better. If we assign the value of money to a commodity like gold, things would always function and cost the same. We would develop a system that is really rigid, and hard systems are not ideal. They lack the capacity to handle growing populations or emergency situations where we must provide aid to others. Our governments occasionally overcorrect and print far too much money because they are not flawless. We make fun of our politicians, and the cycle keeps repeating itself. Our economy is currently poised to undergo just that. Due to the worldwide epidemic, we have printed too much money, and we now need to restrict the amount of money in circulation through a process known as quantitative tightening, in order to prevent either too much money being created in the system, which would cause runaway inflation and make things unaffordable, or too little money being created, which would lead to everyone hoarding and saving it. The real purpose of money is to balance the supply along with the population and productivity levels. The argument against this viewpoint is that sound money does not result in a never-ending savings cycle. It has already been done. There was no tight deflation to stifle economic growth before 1971, and the economy was doing fairly well. Only when the government printed an excessive amount of money was the gravy train destroyed. Since the government can't print money on a gold standard, this implies that there will be no economic handouts in times of economic struggle, which proponents argue that it is a good thing. Gold enthusiasts like Peter Schiff would fervently assert that switching back to the gold standard is necessary. The 21st century's technological advancements and high levels of productivity have never been supported by a gold standard. According to economists, having sound money would have increased our economy by 50%. At the moment, there are gold and silver cryptos which are backed on a 1-to-1 ratio known as KAU and KAG. It's merely one response to oppose the government from creating excessive money. In general, we must change and switch to a slightly more adaptable system. That's what we're witnessing with crypto, in my opinion. It is the democratization of money, moving it out of the hands of the government and into those of the general public. Maybe it's not about which of those is the best, but it's about giving people the ability to choose the best option to solve the problem at hand.